whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei, start your engines, people. The COVID traffic light goes live in T-minus 11 days. Put it in your diary, 11:59pm December the 2nd, or for Aucklanders, day 108. But an early treat. The lockdown mullet's days are numbered. Hallelujah. Auckland hairdressers can open from this Thursday. Kiwis are forced to zigzag around the globe to get a flight that matches MIQ spots on offer. Marsden Point Refinery confirms it'll stop processing fuel next year. That means 200 jobs down the pipe. Someone hand us a broom, maybe make that two. There's a lot to mop up after that All Blacks game. And is that a shark in the water? We'll let you know.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. Vaccinated Aucklanders can get a haircut from Thursday, with hairdressers and barbers trialling a new vaccine pass before it comes into effect with the rollout of the traffic light system. The whole country will move into the traffic light system in 11 days, with the new framework coming into effect at midnight next Thursday. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says hairdressers and barbers are a safe way to trial the pass.
Out of all of the venues still closed, they pose the lowest risk by reopening. There are fewer staff employed. Generally, numbers in the space are constrained by the number of chairs and hairdressers available, and distancing between customers can be easily maintained.
More than 1 million people have so far downloaded their vaccine pass. Bay of Plenty residents waiting on COVID-19 results are being told to expect delays as testing demand reaches unprecedented levels. 5 new cases popped up in the region today, bringing the total active cases in the area to 17. Bay of Plenty DHB Incident Controller Trevor Richardson says teams are working long hours to process thousands of tests and people should be prepared for delays. He says people who have not received their test results after 5 days should call the DHB's swab results line. Nationally, 205 new community cases of COVID were reported today. A man in his 40s has also died from COVID-19 in Middlemore Hospital. A close contact of the confirmed COVID case in Napier claims the man has been in the community for a lot longer than health officials are letting on. The Hawke's Bay District Health Board has referred RNZ's questions to the Health Ministry. Our Hawke's Bay reporter Tom Kitchen has more.
RNZ has spoken to a close contact of the case and has agreed not to name him to protect his privacy. He says the person who is infected with the virus arrived in Hawke's Bay on Sunday the 14th of November, but didn't look at his test results until Saturday the 20th. He believes the man has been out in the community during that time, but officials haven't listed any locations of interest in the city. The Ministry of Health hasn't yet responded to a request for comment.
The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says Healthline was tasked with the follow-up care in the case and was talking to the person on a daily basis. But the service assumed the infectious man was still in Auckland, not Napier. Dr Bloomfield says the system should have notified the local public health unit, but it didn't happen and hasn't been rectified. Auckland teenagers say they're skipping some or all of their NCEA exams. The region's students will get an unexpected event grade calculated by their school for any NCEA exams they miss. Students told RNZ some have had enough stress for 1 year and others want to concentrate on their weakest subjects.
I found a lot of people are actually not going to be doing exams at all and are just planning to take all their UEGs.
They're working part-time, also having responsibilities at home, which is why they're saying they don't need to do the exams because they did so well in the mock exams.
To take away some of the stress for like other subjects like physics and maths, I find harder. I'm not doing my biology ones.
NCEA and scholarship exams began today and will run until December the 14th. A group of Afghans trying to escape the Taliban have won a High Court judicial review to have their applications to come to New Zealand revisited. The court has ruled that long-standing visa applications cannot be refused because the border was closed due to COVID-19. It says applications have the same rights to enter New Zealand as any other residents once visas are granted. The court has directed Immigration New Zealand to reconsider the granting of visas. Residents of Tranmere Road in the Auckland suburb of Sandringham are happy a missing neighbour has been found alive. There were fears for the welfare of 70-year-old Cindy Lee, who was missing for nearly 2 weeks. She was found at the weekend unharmed but dehydrated. One resident says it was a stressful time.
Really relieved. Everyone was really quite worried for that 2 weeks, and obviously we were being interviewed by police and they searched our properties.
The resident says it's a miracle Ms Lee was found alive. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 5. The knives are out for All Blacks coach Ian Foster, but New Zealand Rugby says he has their full support. Wrapping up the year with back-to-back losses to Ireland and France has led to calls for Foster to be cast aside in favour of Crusaders coach Scott Robertson. However, it was only a few months ago that NZR extended Foster's contract through to the 2023 World Cup. A poll of more than 18,000 fans by the New Zealand Herald found backing for Foster was at just 4.5%. NZR's Chris Lendrum says while the 2 losses are disappointing, the fact the All Blacks have been away for 15 weeks must be taken into account.
It's a tour like no other, as they've called it, long and arduous, and there's going to be learnings to take out of those weeks. But we support Foz and the team, and we're just looking forward to getting them home and getting into the work to assess what we need to do to improve next year.
A review of the All Black season is now underway. The Chief Executive of Cycling New Zealand, Jacques Landry, has resigned amid an ongoing investigation into the death of representative cyclist Olivia Podmore. He took up the role in 2018 to implement the recommendations of the Heron Report, which exposed a culture of bullying, poor behaviour and lack of accountability within the sport's dysfunctional high-performance system. Cycling NZ Chair Phil Holden says Landry indicated in June he was intending to step down but delayed his departure because of the current independent inquiry into Podmore's death. That's the news.
An inaccurate oximeter reading in self-isolation.
I was just reading at 96, 97, so we weren't ringing an ambulance when she was in deep distress.
Preparing for a Delta summer.
The fact that we have COVID in New Zealand is not a new phenomenon. The fact that people will have to be prepared.
And Adele takes a stand against album shuffles.
This is great for music fans, also for artists as well. Adele will definitely get universal applaud for this.
Hello from the other side. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday, Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Cloudy periods and isolated showers, more frequent and possibly heavy this evening in Northland and Bay of Plenty, and tomorrow afternoon and evening from Northland through to Waikato. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain developing, easing to a few showers early tomorrow, mainly about the ranges. Taranaki to Wellington, including Taihape and Wairarapa. Cloudy, becoming fine in the west tomorrow morning, but isolated showers possible about coastal Wairarapa. Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough to Otago except Clutha. Scattered showers mainly inland with some heavy this evening. Thunderstorms possible about inland Otago and Canterbury today. Westland and Fiordin mostly fine, but some evening showers mainly inland with some possibly heavy. For Southland and Clutha, cloudy periods and isolated showers, and for the Chatham Islands, a few showers clearing tomorrow. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 5.
Nā mihi marama, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Mark your calendars, the entire country will move into the new traffic light system in 11 days' time. From 11:59pm Thursday the 2nd of December, Auckland will move into the red setting, as will any regions with low vaccination rates. Everywhere else will move to orange at the same time. From that point, vaccine certificates will be used to determine freedoms. In the meantime, Aucklanders have something else to look forward to. From this Thursday, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says hairdressers and barbers in the supercity can take part in a trial run of the vaccine passes.
It means fully vaccinated Aucklanders can get their haircut so long as they present their My Vaccine Pass. We'll be posting and sending out detailed sector guidance, but in short, hairdressers will need to operate with vaccine passes, take bookings only, so no walk-ins. That means that we can ensure we don't have large amounts of congestion. Staff must also be fully vaccinated. and they must operate broadly as they do under Alert Level 2, which they'll be familiar with.
Te Pita Mayor Jacinda Ardern explains why hairdressers and barbers were chosen for the trial.
Because out of all of the venues still closed, they pose the lowest risk by reopening. There are fewer staff employed. Generally, numbers in the space are constrained by the number of chairs and hairdressers available, and distancing between customers can be easily maintained.
The government will release more vaccine certificate guidance for businesses in sectors later this week. So for hairdressers, it's time to get ready to open the doors to Aucklanders who haven't seen them for more than 3 months. Our reporter Nick Trubridge joins me now from Takapuna. Nick, you've got someone there who's pretty happy about all of this?
I do, Lisa. I'm not in a barbershop, as you can see. They, of course, don't open for a couple of days yet, but I am at the Barbershop Co.'s headquarters. They own 19 barbershops in Auckland. I've got the founder of the Barbershop Co. with me, Adam. Adam, first of all, what are we? We're nearly 4 months into this thing. That's 4 months of no cuts, 4 months of no customers coming through the door. How has it been for you guys?
It's been really long, Nick. I think it's about 96 days. We've still got a couple of days to go, but really pleased for the announcement today that we're able to reopen and get back to cutting hair.
But there's a catch, isn't there? At the moment, it's bookings only. You guys, of course, operate usually, as most traditional barbers would do, a walk-up model. So how are you going to get around that? Have you had the team scrambling over that one this afternoon?
It's definitely a curveball for us, Nick. We've got to figure out in about 2 days how to place about 10,000 bookings. So it's definitely been a curveball. So we've got a bit of work to do over the next couple of days, but we'll figure it out and we're up to the challenge. So we're going to get open. Yeah.
What was the reaction when you heard that news at 4 p.m, Adam? Disbelief? Did you have a heads up?
No heads up, no. We were surprised. Just we're here at the same time you guys do. So, absolutely. We all fell off a chair kind of, okay, we're opening on Thursday. Good news, we want to be open, so pleased for that. We've just got to figure out how to do it.
The issue of vaccine passes, of course, no one can make a booking and no one can turn up to get the haircut unless they have a vaccine pass. How are your team going to manage that?
Yeah, we were sort of getting our head around checking vaccine status in stores. We knew that the merchant side of it's becoming available tomorrow. Now that there's this side of it, we've got to figure that out. So I can't answer, I don't know.
How much would it cost to get? I've got a sort of half-hearted mullet coming on.
Yeah.
How much am I looking at?
$35. Yeah, that's our standard haircut price. Yeah. Yep.
Do I get rid of it or do I leave it?
I recommend chopping it down. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam. And Lisa, of course, the announcement today didn't just affect hairdressers. There are obviously hospitality operators affected by this announcement as well. We will have one of those here in Takapuna in about 10 to 15 minutes.
Nick, give yourself some more credit, mate. That's not a half-hearted mullet. You've gone full ball with that. Yeah. So maybe Adam can give you a few pointers because his hair's looking pretty tidy for a guy who's been in lockdown. Get it cut before you come back. Do it yourself. DIY. Thanks, Nick. That is Nick Trubridge live there from Takapuna. If you want to check out his hair, go online. We'll put the video up. It is 12 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai e Hariaki nei. Marsden Point Oil Refinery confirms it's shutting down production and 200 jobs will go. Police say a 70-year-old Auckland woman missing for 12 days was found alone inside an address, extremely dehydrated. They don't believe foul play was involved in Cindy Lee's disappearance and say she's now in a critical condition in ICU. It's sent shockwaves through her Sandringham community. Our reporter Katie Doyle has been speaking to residents.
Relief. It's a word you'll hear a lot today on Tranmere Road. After 11 days missing, Cindy Lee has been found alive near her home in Sandringham.
Really relieved. Everyone was really quite worried for that 2 weeks, and obviously we were being interviewed by police and they searched our properties. So yeah, it's a miracle that after 12 days she was found.
Questions came thick and fast from residents this morning. What happened? How was she missing for so long?
You know, for 12 days and to come out and be found alive, it'd be interesting to see what's happened. You know, was she okay? And hopefully nothing sinister's happened to her.
This afternoon, some of those were finally answered by police. Detective Senior Sergeant Jeff Baber confirmed she was found unharmed but extremely dehydrated. Police don't think there was any foul play or third party involved. Miss Lee knew and had access to the address she was located in, but it was unoccupied by the homeowner over the period she was missing. Neighbour Leah is just excited Miss Lee, who she always says walking in the morning, has been found.
Because at the moment we're asking ourselves what really happened. Yeah, but the main thing to us is she's been found. Yeah, because we were all worried.
And so is this Tranmere Road resident who shares a home with an elderly parent. The initial mystery of Cindy Lee's disappearance had put her on edge.
Feeling a lot safer now. That know that our community is back to normal, and that Cindy's back home safely.
I noticed on your door it says you've got an elderly mother. I mean, did that add a bit of anxiety?
Yeah, because this is mostly family community and mostly elder people and young families. So to find that she's back home safely, it kind of gives you that more safety feeling kind of thing.
Police are still trying to figure out what happened in the 11 days Cindy Lee spent away from home. She remains in a critical but stable condition in Auckland Hospital's intensive care unit.
The final nails in the coffin for the country's only oil refinery. Refining New Zealand today confirmed Marsden Point will close next year and instead move to an import-only terminal. That will end 60 years of local production and cut more than 200 jobs. First Union says it's a worst-case scenario with the environment, fuel security and the economy all set to take a hit. Nita Blake-Person reports.
It's been a long time coming, but today's confirmation of the Marsden Point closure is still a massive blow to Northland.
It's certainly not good. How bad it actually is remains to be seen, but it's not going to be good. Not going to be good at all.
Rob Smith is a control room operator at the refinery and has worked there for 18 years. The refinery is estimated to contribute about 7% of Northland's GDP, but Smith says the full impact of the closure may not be known for years.
It's a huge employer directly. It's a huge employer in terms of the external services provided to the refinery, which actual depth of that probably nobody really knows, but it's pretty deep, particularly for the whangarei economy, let alone the Northland. It's a huge player.
The Marsden Point operation will stop processing fuel in April next year and instead move to an import-only terminal. It comes after a substantial decline in refining margins in the Asia region. Shareholders voted in favour of the change in August, but the final confirmation was delayed in recent weeks. Jared Abbott from First Union says the government failed to act in that time.
What we're seeing now is pretty much a worst-case scenario where we're going to lose the skill base, we're going to lose the economic benefit, we're going to have fuel security issues, and then on top of that you've also got the fact the margins are now up and high and a lot of those shareholders are going to miss out on that money.
There are 300 employees at the refinery and that will drop to 70 over the next few years. The closure has also raised concerns about fuel security, with overseas governments intervening to save refineries facing closure elsewhere. A petition calling for the government to declare Marsden Point a national strategic asset has received nearly 18,000 signatures. The government here maintains fuel security won't be affected and it has not been asked for assistance in keeping the refinery operational. But Jared Abbott says they still could have stepped in.
Just because they didn't request it doesn't mean it's not the government's responsibility to do the best thing for New Zealanders.
Jared Abbott says the closure will push up New Zealand's carbon emissions as we will be reliant on fuel processed overseas to lower environmental standards. But Z Energy CEO Mike Bennett says importing refined fuel was the best choice for New Zealand as refining margins had been volatile in recent years. Refining NZ Chief Executive Naomi James says work is already underway to make the change and decommission the site, and she says there are plenty of opportunities.
It being an industrial consented site, proximity to Auckland, import and export capacity and really large electricity and gas connections. So we'll be continuing to look at what are all those future uses that could be made of our site.
It's expected to cost between $200 and $220 million to transition the site over the next 5 to 6 years. Refining NZ will rename itself Channel Infrastructure New Zealand as part of the change, which will take effect from April next year.
It is 19 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Returning to our top story now, and the whole country will go into the traffic light system from 11:59pm on the 2nd of December. Auckland and low vaccine areas will start in the highest restriction red zone, while others may start in the orange zone. The COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins joins me now. Tēnā koe, Minister.
Tēnā koe, Lisa.
Why do we need 11 days to get ready to shift into the traffic light system?
Well, it's not just having time to get ready. It's also about, to get those vaccination rates up. We want to get as close to that 90% fully vaccinated as we possibly can when we shift to the traffic light system. We do also need to pass the law change through Parliament this coming week, which is what we'll be doing.
So are we just delayed for administration?
No, not at all. As I said, we want to get those vaccination rates up. That's certainly a key factor here.
Okay, so we know Auckland's going in at red, right? Auckland's got some of the highest vaccination rates. What triggers a move to orange? What do we need to achieve to get there?
Well, we're looking at a variety of things, and next week we will set out more details on the sorts of things that will, trigger a shift up or down those levels. But some of the things that we'll be looking at, vaccination rates clearly is looking good for Auckland. We'll also look at case numbers, rate of hospitalisation, contact tracing capability, the nature of the communities that it's in. Those are all the sorts of things that will help to inform that, and we'll set out a bit more detail about that next week.
Because Dr Bloomfield said today that the case numbers had stabilised in Auckland. ICU admissions were stable. We're constantly being told we've still got significant capacity in ICU in Auckland, so we're not at the red zone health system under pressure. So why can't we just go straight to orange?
Well, look, at this point, I think when we move to red, that opens things up quite substantially in Auckland, and we do have to be aware that with that opening up comes additional risk, and so we need to see what that does in terms of, transmission and so on. What we don't want to do is get to the point where we just move too fast and end up with an outbreak that we then couldn't get back under control. So we've got the outbreak, it's not completely in the sense that we're still getting several hundred cases a day, but we've got it, it's in a manageable level, and we need to keep it there.
Minister, you've got a bit of a dodgy cell phone there, so I might just get you to move around a little bit because we want to hear what you've got to say. So is it true that we're going to move to orange in Auckland on December 15th to marry up with the day that everyone is allowed to travel out of the city?
Oh, we haven't made any decisions about that at all yet.
Okay, so for the other regions, if they are not at 90% double dosed, will they absolutely go into red on that day one?
If they've got very low rates, if they're a long way away from getting to that 90% double dosed, then moving them into red will provide an additional layer of protection. But
what's a long way away, Minister? Is that 5% below target or greater?
Look, I don't want to put hard and fast numbers on it because ultimately we want to be able to make sensible and pragmatic decisions. And as soon as you put a number like 90%, which we have, you run the risk that, if people are a few hundred doses off, then maybe they'd miss out. And if I then adjusted it now and then people were 100 doses away from the adjusted number, then we'd find ourselves back in that position again. So we want to be able to be pragmatic.
Okay, well, let's just give a few examples. Tairāwhiti, 73%, Northland, 74%, Whanganui, 76%, Lakes, 76%, 76% for West Coast, 78% for Bay of Plenty, Taranaki, 78%, Hawke's Bay, 79%. So if 90% double dosed is the benchmark with only a little bit of wiggle room, a significant chunk of the country is going to be in red, isn't it, Minister?
Well, if you look at the number of doses it requires to get every DHB region in the country to that 90% double dosed, it is doable within sort of about 2 weeks. So, but that is if people come forward to be vaccinated. So, we can't control for demand. That ultimately comes down to the population. So we want to be able to review what happens over the next week, so that we can decide what the best level for each region to go into the system at is.
So based on those numbers, Minister, a large percentage of the country will be in red, won't it, given your benchmarks that you've already set?
Look, I think it is likely that certainly areas outside of Auckland are going to be going into the protection framework at red.
How often will you review the settings?
We'll be reviewing them more frequently in the beginning, and then we want to get to a review
So weekly,
cycle.
every week at a cabinet meeting, or how often?
Probably about every 2 weeks initially, and then moving probably to a monthly cycle thereafter. We want the traffic light framework to be a little more predictable, so there won't be sudden shifts up and down as there are with the alert levels. It'll be a bit more predictable. People will get a bit more notice because it will be based on different, there'll be different factors that we're considering.
Given that Auckland's basically running a suppression scenario here, is it even possible for us to get to green ever?
Look, ultimately, the goal is to get the whole country to green, because that's, we want to get life back to normal. This is the protection framework is a transitional measure. It is something that we're going to be doing for a while. We don't know exactly how long we're going to do it for, but we will, in time, get back to the point where life starts to feel more normal. And that's what this is about. This is about stepping us through that, through an orderly way, so that we can continue to protect the public. We can continue to, not have a massive outbreak that overwhelms us and that results in a whole lot of people being unnecessarily harmed by COVID-19. We want to make sure that we can still, transition in a sensible way.
Okay, speaking of life back to normal, let's talk about MIQ. There's a few things I'd like to get through quite quickly. Any more MIQ lobby releases before Christmas?
Yes, there almost certainly will be.
And they'll contain spots for December?
Yes, I believe they do. I haven't actually got the latest numbers in front of me, but yes, I believe there's still some more rooms to be released before the end of the year.
When are you getting rid of MIQ altogether?
We should have more to say about that within the next 2 weeks. We're awaiting some public health advice that's just getting some peer reviewed by our external experts to give us a bit of a sense on how they're feeling about that. And that should be within the next week or two, that we can give people a bit more certainty about the sort of timetable we're talking about. We're still in the first quarter of the year, but we want to be able to provide people a bit more information about what that looks like.
So, Minister, within the next fortnight, will you give us a date for when you think MIQ will end?
The removal of MIQ restrictions is likely to be a progressive exercise rather than just waking up one night and finding that it's all gone.
Okay, a date for the beginning of the progression. Will you give us that?
I think that we will definitely be able to give people that within the next 2 weeks.
So we'll know before Christmas where we stand and how long it's going to take to phase MIQ completely out?
Not completely, but we'll certainly get a good sense of it within the next couple of weeks.
Trans-Tasman bubble, we're getting texts in while we're talking. Is it going to get up and running again this year?
Unlikely.
So when do you envisage it will?
In the first quarter of next year, the restrictions at the border are going to be very different to the way they are now. Now, it doesn't mean the Trans-Tasman bubble will look exactly the same, but I think you'll see a lot more movement between New Zealand and Australia in the first quarter of next year.
Northland, people going north from Auckland, how's that border going to look different to going south? Because you're guaranteeing iwi that you're going to make them feel comfortable around security and safety. So how's it going to look?
Well, that's tied into decisions around what level they move into the COVID protection framework at, and those sorts of things. But we are still going to have people moving from Auckland into Northland. There will be spot checks, and there'll be plenty of spot checks, I would have thought, at that particular border to make sure that people are fully vaccinated or have had their negative COVID-19 test.
So, Minister, to be clear, your expectation is that the police will do more spot checks going north than what they are for traffic going south?
They'll be looking particularly at how to minimise the risk of COVID-19 spreading outside of Auckland and into those populations who are.
So is that your expectation, a greater number of checks?
Well, ultimately, those are decisions that public health and the police will make working together.
So you don't have any expectations?
Well, like I said, we're working with iwi, and public health and police will also be working with iwi and others living in that area to make sure that we're providing as much reassurance as we can.
Can iwi tell people to stay away? Because they are.
Well, look, they're entitled to have their views and they're entitled to say whatever they like. We live in a country where free speech is available to everybody.
So if someone had said, stay away from my region, would you still go, Minister?
I think it would depend on the circumstances.
OK, well, Tairawhiti, they'd prefer you didn't go. And in parts of the Bay of Plenty, the iwi have specifically said unless you whakapapa to them, they would prefer you to stay out of their tribal territories. Would you respect that, Minister?
Well, I think you recognise that, regions aren't speaking with one voice here. So, yes, there will be some people in Northland and some people in Tairawhiti who feel that way. There are going to be some people who feel equally strongly the other way, that they want people to come. So,
but would you respect it? It's a straightforward question, Minister. Would you respect that if they're telling you not to come to their tribal territories, that they're worried that their people are being put at risk? Would you honour that and stay away?
Look, I think I would say to them, get your people vaccinated. That's the single best thing that you can do to protect them.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's the COVID-19 Response Minister, Chris Hipkins. Homai o whakaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mo te hōtaka nei. What do you make of that? 11 days to go into the traffic light system. Auckland's going in at red, and it looks like a lot of the rest of the country's going in at red too. Vaccination rates are going to be a key decider of that. Let us know what you reckon. Pātui mai, text me on 2101. You can tweet us at checkpoint.rnz or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. 2 losses on the trot is not something an All Blacks coach is used to, but that's the reality for Ian Foster, who is facing the heat after a disappointing Northern tour. A loss to South Africa last month and back-to-back defeats to Ireland and France have put the spotlight on the coach, who's locked in already for the next World Cup. Felicity Reid reports.
Ian Foster is indignant about questions over his leadership. He says he's not feeling the pressure, despite being the first All Blacks coach in the modern era to lose consecutive tests in his first 2 years in charge. Foster says the team's improving under him.
When you look at the overall year and you look at what we've achieved, I think when you look at the context of that and the growth, and I think there's been quite a significant growth from last year. We've got a whole bunch of players that a number of them have come up here for the first time, haven't been up here for 3 years and experienced that.
In August, New Zealand Rugby extended Foster's contract through until the 2023 World Cup, getting him to sign on the dotted line before he'd been truly tested overseas. They're still backing Foster, and NZR's Chris Lendrum says while the 2 losses are disappointing, the fact the All Blacks have been away for 15 weeks must be taken into account.
So it's a tour like no other, as they've called it, long and arduous, and there's going to be learnings to take out of those weeks. But we support Foz and the team, and we're just looking forward to getting them home and getting into the work to assess what we need to do to improve next year.
Former All Black captain Sir Wayne Back-Shelford doesn't think sacking Foster and his assistants is the answer, but he admits there hasn't been much progress under Foster.
I'm not too worried about the coaching. I just think they've got to change the style of their play. And I think we're actually playing the same brand of football that we were under Mr. Steve Hansen. We haven't actually got any better at it, and our kicking game is not that great.
Another former All Black captain, Stu Wilson, agrees. Wilson says throwing the ball wide and hoping right wing Will Jordan dots down on the try line is not a sustainable tactic going into the World Cup.
We tend to win a few more close games than other countries, but right at the moment we're being beaten by 3 countries that are well coached, well drilled, their players know exactly what to do, and they play with very few mistakes, and therefore we cop 3 losses. Now, if we can't learn from that, then you've got to start looking at the coaches. What are you doing? What other options do we have? What's plan B if plan A doesn't go good? And I don't see a plan B on the board at the moment.
Wilson says there are certain fans that might have an idea about what should happen next.
Anyone down in the South Island will probably be pushing Razor Robertson to try and take the thing over. I think you just got to stick with what you've got. They're going to cop a bit. In fact, they've copped quite a bit so far. They'll cop more when they get home.
That criticism and scrutiny from far and wide is something Wilson says comes with the territory.
And if you're not prepared to fess up to it and stand up to the criticism from former players in the media of New Zealand and little old ladies that sit in their homes and know more about the game than I do, then get out of the jersey and find another job.
It's the All Blacks, so everyone's got an opinion. But former player and now Blues coach Leon MacDonald is more measured. He's confident the All Blacks will take time to reflect on the latest tour.
Only really sit back and take a deep breath, and often these are the times where change happens, and if you can identify the right areas to fix and you get that right, then it hasn't been lost, and I'm pretty sure the All Blacks will make sure they do that really well and review and find out where they need to improve their game.
Plenty for the side to chew over while they do their week in MIQ and for the long summer ahead. New Zealand Rugby expects to review the season in the coming weeks.
And that report was from Felicity Reid. Kia ora, e te iwi e haere nei e our checkpoint. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The complicated travel routes Kiwis are flying to get back in time for their MIQ slot. And the test sheets are out. NCEA exams begin. Homai o whakaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program tonight. Don't forget you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at checkpoint.rnz or type us out an email. Checkpoint@rnz.co.nz is our address. It is time now for the headlines. Ane Amarama mena pita pita kōrero.
Thank you, Lisa. Vaccinated Aucklanders can get a haircut from Thursday, and the whole country will move to the traffic light system in 11 days. In an update this afternoon, the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says hairdressers and barbers will be trialling the new vaccine pass before the traffic light system is rolled out on Friday next week. She says it will be a safe way to trial the pass because customers are seated and separated. Meanwhile, the COVID response minister Chris Hipkins says the days before the traffic light system starts will be a chance to get vaccination rates up and allow the law change to pass through Parliament. There are 205 new community cases of COVID today and one death, a man in his 40s in Auckland. It's claimed the Napier COVID-19 case was in the community for longer than health officials have stated. A close contact says the person arrived in Hawke's Bay from Auckland on Sunday, November the 14th, but didn't look at his test results for almost a week. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says Healthline was talking to the person on a daily basis, but he says the service assumed the infectious man was still in Auckland, not Napier. NCEA exams are underway, but some Auckland teenagers say they're skipping them because of stress or strategy. Students in Auckland, Northland and Waikato will get unexpected event grades for any NCEA exams they miss because of COVID-19 disruption. Auckland students spoken to by RNZ say they're skipping exams if they're happy with the unexpected event grade. And Refining NZ has confirmed that the country's only oil refinery at Marsden Point will close in April next year and shift to an import-only terminal. More than 200 jobs will be lost. Control room operator at the refinery, Rob Smith, says it will be a big blow for Northland. Those are the headlines. Our next news update is at 6.
Kia ora rau e hoa. Auckland hospitality will remain shut for now, but finally has the certainty it's been waiting for. Cafes, restaurants and bars will be allowed to reopen basically from Friday the 3rd of December. Our reporter Nick Trubridge joins me again from Takapuna. Nick, and how's this news going down there?
It's going down beautifully. It's going down about as well as this delicious green tea kombucha, Lisa, that Street Organics, which is where I'm at, brew on their own on site. It is absolutely superb. I've got with me Nikki. She's the owner of Street Organics. Nikki, you've just heard that announcement, about in the last hour or so. Finally some certainty, but let's cover again the last 4 months first of all. What's it been like for you guys?
It's been an interesting journey, Nick. We've had to roll with the punches, obviously. It's been very challenging. We're quite fortunate in our business because of our location. We have a mix of residential and commercial customers for takeaway, and also our focus on healthy whole foods really helps in this instance because more and more people are conscious of that and what they're eating and drinking. So our organic whole foods approach has really set us in a good position for that. So a very loyal customer base, an amazing team, and it looks like we're going to be just fine, fortunately. I know, sadly, many others are not. I know many operators that have had to close in lots of industries, and I really feel for them, but we'll be okay. It's the mental health of the team that has been quite challenging as well, and looking after them and making sure they're okay and engaged and motivated and as happy as they can be given the circumstances. But I think we'll be okay.
Absolutely. Of course, just like hairdressers, you can go back, but there are a number of catches, obviously the most significant one being the need to check those vaccination passes. So another task for your staff, other than serving things like this delicious kombucha and coffees and teas. Yeah. How are you going to deal with the logistics of that? Yeah, so as far as we understand, we will have to verify everyone's vaccination status before they enter the premises. So we have one front door and we will position someone, myself. I don't want my team to bear the brunt of anyone's frustrations or the difficulties that might pose, in the beginning at least. So for the first few days between myself and our amazing operations manager, we will man the door, person the door, and scan everybody's passes. We've seen what they look like. We've got our own passes ourselves. Apparently the Verify app itself will be available from tomorrow and we'll be able to practice with it. But time will tell operationally how much it impacts us, how it affects people, the sensitivities involved with that, the concerns that customers have, the customers that we will potentially lose, at least temporarily, because they're choosing not to be vaccinated, is really sad.
But so we don't know all the ins and outs just yet, and we don't know how it will affect us completely. But what I do know for sure is it will increase our labour cost, which is another cost that we don't particularly want to bear at the moment, but we have no choice.
Because that's something we've heard talking to others in Takapuna is this concern around putting staff between the customer and the rule.
Yeah.
That's why you're going to be on the door. You envisage there could potentially be some issues there?
Yeah, I think we have an amazing customer base and we're really fortunate, and I think most of our customers will be on board with it, some reluctantly, but they'll be on board. I don't envisage massive challenges, but there could be. And some of my team are really young. I don't want to put them in a policing role like that at the door. It's just not right and it's not fair. And hopefully in time, when it becomes more normal behaviour, I'll be able to share that load around a bit more, but in the beginning at least it will be either myself or our operations manager from open to close, and we're open 7 days and 2 nights. So it's going to be some long hours.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you very much, Nikki, and all the best. Lisa, as I say, people do come down here. The kombucha is absolutely outstanding. There will be a few hoops that you have to jump through, but that's fine. It's worth it for some of this stuff. They're open, like everyone else, in just over a week.
Yes.
Thanks, Nick. That's Nick Trubridge, who was joining us live there from Takapuna. Ko taku hoa inai ko Nona Peltier, who joins us now to talk about business. Hey Nona, Kiwi Properties half-year profit, it's almost tripled. And this is obviously on the back of gains in the value of portfolio and rental income. So what numbers are we talking here?
Yeah, we're talking about fairly large ones here. The company made bottom line $143.2 million. Now that compares with $54.2 million the year before. And that's for the 6 months ended September. And that's mostly because of a big valuation gain. They got their portfolio rose $93.6 million, and that was versus just a $9.2 million gain the previous 6 months ended September. So what does that mean? Well, the company's portfolio is now worth about $3.5 billion, and they're working very hard to increase that value. They've started development of that rent-to-own apartment dwellings that we're going to see at Sylvia Park and also at Lynn Mall. So they're doing that, and they're very positive about the retail sector, which has been doing it hard, as we all know. Where retail has reopened, there's been a lot of shoppers, so the outlook is positive as long as, I guess, we do have that opening and that it maintains at this level. So, yeah, they're expecting the second half to be quite strong as well.
And Nona, who's the newbie on the stock exchange that's had a strong debut?
Well, this is a software tech startup. It's called Trade Windows. Now, it listed on the market, but it didn't raise any funds doing it. So they weren't basically selling shares. They were basically just... it's a compliance listing. So the issue or the reference price at this stage was 92 cents a share. And it opened at $1.12, which was already a premium. But it had an amazing day, and it closed at $1.55, which, is a big gain on 92 cents a share, if anything. So it's an early stage software business. At some point in the future, they're going to be looking to raise some capital, but that's somewhere in the future. Right now, they're just looking at getting started, getting their name out there, and seeing where that goes.
And what other things were happening on the markets today?
Well, okay, so just on share prices, Kiwi Property share price rose 1%, and that's exactly the opposite direction of the overall top 50 index. It fell 1%. That was a 132-point fall to 12,608, and that's in line with what we're seeing in Asia. It's also had a soft start to the week, and the dollar is under pressure, and that's mostly because the Australian dollar fell to a 7-week low, and it dragged the Kiwi down with it somewhat. So we're steady at just under 69.9 US cents, 96.5 Australian, and 52 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite, that's Nona Peltier with Business News. Some Kiwis heading home are being forced onto milk run flights, hopping from one destination to the next to marry their arrival up with their MIQ spot. Flights to New Zealand are still pretty limited, so that literally means going backwards, sometimes thousands of kilometres, in order to go forwards. One person helping put together the pieces of what is a very complicated travel puzzle is House of Travel's Tim Malone, and he joins me now. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Lisa. How are you doing?
I'm really well. Give me some examples of some of the problem locations and kind of where people are having to hop to in order to get home to New Zealand.
There's a lot of them, and some of them are quite surprising. Australia is one that can be difficult for some people. You wouldn't think so, but Air New Zealand don't fly from Sydney to Auckland every day or from Brisbane to Auckland every day. So if someone's got an MIQ spot that is for the wrong day and there's no flight coming directly from Australia, then ultimately they're going to have to look at some other routes. Or if they don't know how to do that, they'll just give up their MIQ spot, and that's a pretty terrible situation. So Australia is one of those. And New York, anywhere in the States, is another one because there aren't daily flights to New Zealand from those places.
So if you're coming from the US, where do you have to bounce around to in order to get here?
Well, Air New Zealand fly from Los Angeles to Auckland only 3 times a week. That situation is almost unbelievable to most people in the street. 2 years ago, Air New Zealand were flying twice a day to and from Los Angeles, and daily flights to San Francisco, Chicago, Houston, etc. But now that there are only 3 flights per week from the whole of North America, and they're all from Los Angeles, if you've got an MIQ spot, which is one of the other 4 days of the week, then ultimately we'll probably fly you back via Dubai with Emirates or via Singapore with Singapore Airlines, or even via Doha with Qatar Airways. It's a long way around, but you have to arrive in New Zealand on the day that your MIQ is scheduled.
Given the schedule you've just outlined there, you basically sort of got a 50-50 chance of scoring an MIQ spot on a day where there's no bus home, so to speak.
You've got a 50-50 chance if you know that information. You've got a less than 50-50 chance if you didn't know that and you were trying to book your MIQ and you just thought you'd book a day that was convenient to yourself, and then you go and try and book a flight and there isn't one.
So people get caught out?
All the time, unfortunately.
Is it a seasonal thing, this level of demand with Christmas and summer and people wanting to come home and see families and things like that?
I think that is certainly part of it, yes. Every year, pre-COVID or COVID, November, December, January are peak seasons for demand for travel to New Zealand. And a lot of reasons for that too, not just coming home for Christmas, but a lot of employment contracts finish at the end of the calendar year. And so that's when Kiwis tend to come home from the Middle East or UK, and that's when their employment contracts will roll over. So typically they'd come home to New Zealand for a month every 2 years, then get a new contract and go back for another 2 years. So this time of year is pretty heavy.
So if it's slim pickings, Tim, on the Air New Zealand schedule, what about other international airlines? Give us an idea of what it's like in terms of those airlines coming here compared to what it was, before the pandemic.
Well, there are really only 4 airlines that come to New Zealand with any regularity. Singapore Airlines, Qatar Airways, Emirates, and of course Air New Zealand are flying to a limited range of destinations. Cathay Pacific from Hong Kong used to fly daily or twice a day to Auckland, but they're now once a week, and they don't even run that flight every week. So there are very slim pickings, and although those airlines I just mentioned fly to New Zealand daily, they're generally arriving with very few passengers on board, maybe 80 or 90 on each flight, and that's because that's the number of people that can get a space at MIQ. So there are far more New Zealanders wanting to come home. There's plenty of capacity on the airline side, but there isn't an MIQ.
And of course, the airlines logically will not want to beef up their schedules if they are carrying virtually empty craft here.
That's right. It's going to be very hard for other airlines that used to fly to New Zealand to return. Malaysia Airlines, Philippine Airlines, Thai Airways, even Hawaiian Airlines and United Airlines, for example. I think that they're going to have trouble starting services to New Zealand. They certainly can't do it while MIQ is still in place, because how many of their passengers would be able to secure MIQ, 20 or 30? So, it's just not economical for them. Those airlines that are still flying here, Singapore Airlines, Qatar and Emirates, they ultimately are heroes for the New Zealand public, I think. They've toughed it out, and they've never stopped flying here. They're our heroes, actually.
So I was just speaking to Chris Hipkins, the COVID response minister, earlier in the program. He's saying in the next 2 weeks he intends to announce a schedule for the progressive easing of MIQ restrictions. So hopefully before Christmas he will lay out a plan for what's happening in the first quarter of next year. Does that give you any certainty in terms of recreational travel, people coming back online for things other than, returning Kiwis, visiting home?
Well, we're a travel agent. We're very keen for that, obviously. But we also have to be realistic that airline schedules are very unreliable right now because of the change of all government rules. And it's not just the New Zealand government rules. The Australian government rules change all the time, so do the Singapore government rules and the UK government rules. So there's a lot to come into play here when we're talking about leisure travel for New Zealanders going outbound.
So when you talk about that unpredictability, Tim, you're talking about what people call ghost flights, aren't you? Can you explain that?
Well, typically, an airline that wants to come back to New Zealand, what they've been doing this year, I won't name them, but if you're in our industry, you know who they are. They will typically put a schedule out there with daily flights from wherever they come from to New Zealand. People will book it. They'll go onto Webjet or that airline's website or Skyscanner or whoever, and they'll book those flights because they see them. And pre-COVID, you could book anything you liked and it would turn up. But what those airlines have found consistently through the year is that the demand isn't there. The rules aren't there to allow them to restart. So they just cancel those flights and leave the passenger in the lurch.
Tim, it sounds like it's a difficult thing to navigate. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for talking to us. That is Tim Malone. He's from House of Travel in Albany there and is, piecing together what is a massively complicated puzzle to get people home to New Zealand. Auckland teenagers are citing exhaustion, busyness and strategic thinking as reasons for skipping some or even all of their NCEA exams. The exams began today in Auckland, Northland and Waikato. Students who miss one will get an unexpected event grade instead. The rule recognises the extreme pressure many students have been under, especially in Auckland, where schools were forced to shut in the middle of August. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
Auckland teenager Rosie Risbrook is among thousands of teens who sat this morning's Level 2 physics exam. She's not sure how well she did, and she says it's good to know she can fall back on her unexpected event grade.
I was doing an electricity paper and there was a question that I just totally blanked on, and I was like, it's okay, you still got that grade, so it's fine, which isn't really much nicer.
Students in Auckland, Northland and parts of Waikato will get an unexpected event grade if it's better than their NCEA exam result or if they don't do the exam. It's essentially made NCEA exams optional in those areas, and Rosie Risbrook says she'll skip one of hers.
Usually I would take 5 exams, but I'm planning to take 4 this year because I'm happy with my biology UEGs. So I did quite well in those mocks. So to take away some of the stress for other subjects like physics and maths I find harder, I'm not doing my biology ones.
Year 13 student Mercy Timu Moy plans to sit all 4 of her exams, starting with calculus next week, where she wants to do better than her unexpected event grade.
I didn't get the grade that I wanted in calculus. That's why I'm having a second shot at my exam, just hoping if I can get a higher grade on it. But at the moment I'm feeling pretty confident, just trying not to stress myself out too much.
She says some of her friends have decided they have enough going on in their lives and won't do any of their exams.
They know they're working part-time, also having responsibilities at home, which is why they're saying they don't need to do the exam because they did so well in the mock exam.
Principals say the long months of lockdown learning earlier this year sapped the motivation of many Auckland students. Jess Darnley says that feeling has prompted some of her friends to ditch this year's exams altogether.
This year, a lot of people who I know who would usually kind of aim very high for exams have really lowered their expectations because we're just so over it after this mess of a year. So I found a lot of people are actually not going to be doing exams at all and are just planning to take all their UEGs.
She says the unexpected event grades mean she can concentrate on her scholarship exams.
I've got some unexpected event grades which I'm definitely going to be using for my exams, and those have really helped to relieve the stress of everything. So it means I'm only doing, I think, 2 or 3 actual NCA exams for my subjects that I'm hoping to get a good grade in. But yeah, the UEGs have been really good for helping to relieve the pressure.
It's not clear how many students will miss exams and take unexpected event grades. Glenfield College Principal Paul McKinley says it will make good sense for many students, but he expects a good number will still sit their exams.
I think it's more sort of 50-50, and that's what I hear from most schools around Auckland. So kids are strategic with their thinking. If the students have an excellence already for a UEG and they can't better that, they may not sit that exam because they may prioritise their studying and their learning to focus on the subjects where they need to shift the merits to the excellences.
The exam period will run for just over 3 weeks, finishing on December the 14th.
Some of you getting in touch, hot on the heels of that interview that we've just done with Tim Malone. He's from the House of Travel in Albany, and he's patching together some complicated routes to get people home because MIQ dates, it's a real struggle to marry up flights because very light flight schedules at the moment in and out of New Zealand. This listener says, my niece hopped from Sydney to Singapore for 1 hour, then back to Auckland and arrived today. That's because there's not frequent flights, there's not daily flights, and so it's hard to get your MIQ spot on to get here on time. And this one, I recently had to travel from Dublin to Auckland. I had to go to Dublin, London, Austria, Germany, Tokyo, Auckland to match up with my MIQ place. Talk about lily padding around the world. Do keep your feedback coming on that one. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ if you've got an example of the links that you've had to go to get home. It is 6 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Hey, Muriaki and Pita Pita Kōrero. After the news at 6, we'll be staying with the MIQ theme. Export New Zealand will talk to us about the fears it has that MIQ will drag on well into next year. South Wairarapa locals are worried they could lose land that they've bought and paid for when the government's 3 waters reforms kick in. The land covers about 200 hectares and is worth millions of dollars. Our reporter Soamia Balamidipati has more.
South Wairarapa councillors are concerned multiple pieces of valuable land could be taken over in the government's 3 waters reforms. Hodders Farm and Featherston Golf Course are 2 plots bought for treated wastewater discharge by South Wairarapa District Council. While some of it is used for this purpose, the rest of it, bought in anticipation of increasing need, is leased out. Mayor Alex Bain says if water standards change, more of the land may no longer be suitable for the purpose. However, he says the land itself is an appreciating asset.
It's very hard to revalue land in this environment where yesterday's value is different to today's value. Certainly the golf course was purchased for $1 million, just over $1 million. But we're talking, in each town it is millions of dollars worth of land. It's not an insubstantial asset.
Mayor Bain is concerned the land will be considered a water-related asset and taken under the water reforms, to the detriment of local ratepayers who funded the land's purchase.
Removing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assets from our balance sheet with a token amount in recognition for that, and especially when some of those assets may not be used for water, is a concern for every ratepayer.
This concern is also shared by the district's councillors. Councillor Brenda West says assets paid for by local ratepayers should benefit those people, a view she believes will be shared by councils in other regions. She wants the government to be more transparent about the reforms to help councils plan for the transition.
I don't believe that we're the only council in that particular position. I think if you asked all the other councils, they'd have a pretty similar view, in my opinion, that, getting more information from government on the way forward would be great so we can actually start planning and ensuring that our ratepayers are not impacted as much.
South Wairarapa District Council is questioning whether it will be in a better financial position if it sells the sites before Three Waters comes in. The Department of Internal Affairs would not be interviewed, but said in a statement, Council's water assets will transfer to the new water service entity, not to the central government. It said councils will not be compensated for any transferred assets.
The cost of any such compensation would ultimately have to be borne by ratepayers or taxpayers who funded them in the first place. New Zealanders would effectively be paying twice for the same assets.
The DAA says dual-purpose assets will be looked at before the reforms come into play in July 2024, with initial views indicating these assets can remain with councils, with appropriate protections for water service in place.
The Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai has said she's safe and well in a video call with International Olympic officials. The 35-year-old disappeared from the public eye for almost 3 weeks after she made sexual assault allegations against a senior Chinese minister. Before the video call, China released footage of Peng Shuai apparently happy and healthy. The BBC's John Sudworth has more.
This appears to be the first solid evidence of Peng Shuai's whereabouts since she made her allegation. Released by Chinese state media operatives, you can hear her name being announced. And then a smile and a wave seemingly meant to send a message. All is well. But there are few allegations more sensitive in China than one of sexual assault levelled against a man as senior as former Vice Premier Zhang Gaoli. And previous material released by state media meant to show that Peng Shuai is not being held under duress has only fuelled further speculation.
I don't think this thing is going to end anytime soon, which is why I think in the next few days we can expect more of these quite bizarre and suspicious proofs of life from Chinese state media, because they're starting to realise that this is getting out of control.
Peng Shuai is also reported to have held a video conference with the president of the International Olympic Committee, in which she said she's safe and well but wants her privacy respected. But that too is unlikely to satisfy those calling for a boycott of the Winter Olympics.
Lots of feedback on the traffic light system. Anthony says, just heard about the haircut for the vax. So does this mean my kids can or can't, as they can't be vaccinated? If they're too young to be vaccinated, then they can go. It's only people who can be vaccinated who have to supply a certificate. Someone from the South Island's got in touch saying nothing about the South Island. Some people in some regions in the North Island say don't come south either.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Marama Tipole. The entire country will move into the new traffic light system from next Friday, marking the end of Auckland's lockdown. Auckland will enter the framework at the toughest level, red, and Cabinet will decide other region settings next Monday. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is urging New Zealanders to prepare for the next phase of the country's pandemic response.
But that's a strong message. 200,000 people are due their second dose. Please go out and get it. Make sure you're prepared for vaccine passes because they're coming very soon.
Auckland hairdressers will be allowed to open early from this Thursday to trial the new vaccine pass before it's rolled out across the country. Adam Johansson from the barbershop company in Auckland is surprised and delighted the business will be able to open from Thursday, although he told Checkpoint the rules mean they can't do walk-ins and have to introduce a booking system.
It's definitely a curveball for us. We've got to figure out in about 2 days how to place about 10,000 bookings. So we've got a bit of work to do over the next couple of days, but we'll figure it out and we're up to the challenge. So we're going to get open. Yeah.
Details about the future of MIQ will be revealed within 2 weeks. The COVID-19 response minister, Chris Hipkins, has told Checkpoint he's waiting on some public health advice, but the removal of MIQ restrictions is likely to be done progressively. He says border restrictions will change in the first quarter of next year, with more movement between Australia and New Zealand. Health officials thought a man in Napier who was diagnosed with COVID-19 was actually in Auckland. A close contact of the case claims it was nearly a week before the man who travelled from Auckland saw his positive result. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says Healthline staff were talking with him every day but assumed he was still in Auckland.
This was just something that the system should have notified the local public health unit. It didn't, and we've followed that up to make sure that the system will do that in the future.
The man is now isolating at a council complex in Napier. Auckland teenagers are skipping NCEA exams for reasons including stress and good strategy. The exams began today in Auckland, Northland and Waikato. Students will get an unexpected event grade for any NCEA exam they miss. Auckland students spoken to by RNZ say they're skipping exams if they're happy with the unexpected event grade. They say that allows them to concentrate on other subjects. They also say their friends are missing exams if they're busy or worn out by a stressful year. Exams run for just over 3 weeks. A group of Afghans trying to escape the Taliban have won a High Court judicial review to have their applications come to this country revisited. The case was taken by 2 Afghan nationals, but they represent a wider group in similar circumstances. It involves the families of people who assisted the New Zealand Defence Force. Andrew McRae reports.
Justice Cook says the Afghans are in grave danger, but were denied the chance to escape to New Zealand because the border was closed due to COVID-19. He says long-standing visa applications could not be refused for that reason. Justice Cook says the applicants were wrongly denied critical purpose visitor visas. He says the COVID-19 crisis coincided with a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. Immigration New Zealand has been directed to reconsider the granting of visas.
It could take years for the full impact of the Marsden Point oil refinery closure to be felt on Northland's economy. Refining NZ has confirmed that the country's only oil refinery will close in April next year and shift to an import-only terminal. More than 200 jobs will be lost. Refinery control room operator Rob Smith says it will be a big blow for Northland.
It's a huge employer directly. It's a huge employer in terms of the external services provided to the refinery, which actual depth of that probably nobody really knows, but it's pretty deep, particularly for the Whangarei economy, let alone the Northland. It's a huge player.
Refining NZ says it will support staff to find new employment as the refinery scales down. A number of people have been killed and more than 20 injured after a car ploughed into a holiday parade in the US state of Wisconsin. The incident happened in the town of Waukesha. The local police chief, Dan Thompson, gave this update.
The vehicle struck more than 20 individuals. Some of the individuals were children, and there were some fatalities as a result of this incident. We will not be releasing information on fatalities at this time while we are working on notifying the family members of the deceased.
At least a dozen children were among those taken to hospital. A suspect is in custody. Back home, police have arrested a 32-year-old man in Napier after a hunt involving armed police and a helicopter. He was arrested between 4 and 5 p.m. after an incident in Flaxmere, a suburb of Hastings, this morning where 2 schools were briefly locked down. The man was arrested in Taradale. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Salam Alian takes a detour from his usual stamping ground of Iranian music to bring us the voice of Ahmad Zahir, the Afghan Elvis. The Taliban hate him, at least in public. Peter Lamp looks back on another weekend of sport, and Andy Sinclair from Hyundai, New Zealand, which has just taken delivery of the country's first hydrogen-powered truck. I hope they brought the fuel as well. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday for Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Cloudy periods and isolated showers, more frequent and possibly heavy this evening in Northland and Bay of Plenty, and tomorrow afternoon and evening from Northland to Waikato. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain easing to a few showers early tomorrow, mainly about the ranges. Taranaki to Wellington, including Taihape and Wairarapa, cloudy, becoming fine in the west tomorrow morning, but isolated showers possible about coastal Wairarapa. Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough to Otago, except for Clutha. Scattered showers mainly inland with some heavy in the evenings. Thunderstorms possible about inland Otago and Canterbury for today. Westland and Fiordland mostly fine, but evening showers mainly inland with some possibly heavy. Southland and Clutha, cloudy periods and isolated showers. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers clearing tomorrow. RNZ National at 7 minutes past 6.
Nā mihi marama no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Exporters fear that MIQ will still be here well into the first quarter of next year after a pilot booking scheme for businesses has been extended into February and could stretch into March and beyond. Following an initial pilot, 25 managed isolation spots a month are being ring-fenced for businesses that need to travel overseas to maintain and grow their market. Now, NZ Trade and Enterprise has written to businesses laying out next year's booking schedule for managed isolation. So what should they read into that? Export New Zealand Executive Director Catherine Baird joins me now. Kia ora, Catherine.
Kia ora.
What does that signal to you?
Yes, it looks like it's still going to be very difficult to travel. The government's saying potentially they will open up for international travel more properly and fully in the first quarter. What we're saying to government is actually, can you give us a date, please? Because exporters and business travellers, they really need to plan these trips in advance. They need to figure out when the trade shows are. They need to arrange meetings. There's a whole lot of work that needs to go in beforehand to make a business trip really worthwhile. So really a date would be a huge relief, I think, and that would take a lot of the angst out of the export community that they're carrying at the moment.
In that vein, we've just been talking to Chris Hipkins earlier in the program. He says that they're waiting on some public health advice and the government should be able to, in the next week or two, lay out a schedule for removing MIQ restrictions, but that it will be a progressive exercise. That is, it's not just going to disappear overnight. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I guess that's it's a little concerning. I mean, we've been advocating for probably a good year or more that we need some spaces set aside for business travellers. They are normally considered a lower risk sort of cohort of traveller. They're attached to brands. They need to be doing the right thing. You can guarantee they're fully vaccinated and all those sorts of things. So if it's going to be a slow, drawn-out process where we only have, dribs and drabs of access, I think that won't send a great signal to our export community. And, let's face it, we need to earn these overseas dollars. We've got a lot of debt to pay back.
What is your position on what should happen with MIQ and by when?
Well, we hear from the airlines that early Feb would be doable from their point of view to get open again, with IATA and international travel mutual recognition and things of who can come in and what they need to do. We would like to see MIQ really disappear for business travel altogether. Maybe you'd go and self-isolate for 7 days as being shortened to an MIQ anyway. Double vaxxed, COVID testing, all of those things that I'm sure we can tick the boxes on. The rest of the world's opening up to travel. They're getting back into face-to-face meetings, and our people really need to be doing the same.
When you talk about 7 days shortened, are you talking about at home?
Yeah, absolutely. Or business travel, they would, if they needed to, they would get Airbnbs if they needed to be apart from the family. I mean, they would have no trouble doing that. The value of the travel is so high that I'm sure they wouldn't mind investing in a bit of their own support. But, that would be an awful lot cheaper than spending all that time in hotels, and that's a big cost and it's a lot of downtime.
So we're 2 years into this now. What is the perception overseas in terms of whether New Zealand is open for business or not?
Yeah, look, I think we're definitely looking closed for business, and that's not a reputation we want to have. The rest of the world's reconnecting. We need to get out there and reconnect.
So what are the real consequences of that, Catherine? If they think we're closed for business, what are the actual consequences that you're seeing?
Well, you lose opportunities and you start to look like you're hard to do business with. And, as an exporter, you want to be seamless. You want to seem like you're not that far away. You want to seem like you can effortlessly be there. So, it doesn't send a good signal. And, we've got manufacturers that are looking to offshore their manufacturing because they just cannot go into another closed lockdown situation and not be supplying vital components.
So this arrangement allows business 25 spots. If indeed it's going to carry on, MIQ, through the first quarter of next year, how many spots do you need if your position is not going to change? Is 25 enough?
No.
What is the magic number?
Oh, look, who knows, but it'd be in the hundreds. I mean, I think a lot of businesses look at that 25 slots and don't even bother to put their hat in the ring. You know, the time it takes them to apply and really, I mean, what a lot of them are doing at the moment is just exporting themselves. So they're just sending people offshore, and if they can't get back, they're just having to deal with that. Or they're employing more people overseas to work for them, or they're packing up their family, like we've seen with sports people, and they're going to the market.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That's Export New Zealand Executive Director Catherine Baird there. Australia's easing its border restrictions further, allowing quarantine-free travel for fully vaccinated travellers from Japan and South Korea from next week. Prime Minister Scott Morrison also says international students and visa holders will no longer have to apply for a travel exemption. The ABC's David Sparks has more.
The Prime Minister Scott Morrison has delivered the news many have been waiting an entire pandemic to hear.
From the 1st of December 2021, fully vaccinated eligible visa holders will be able to come to Australia without needing to apply for a travel exemption. Eligible visa holders, including skilled and student cohorts, as well as humanitarian temporary working holiday maker and provisional family visa holidays.
If you're in the horticulture game, it's good news. That industry relies heavily on backpackers to pick fruit and veg. Guy Getter in Orange, New South Wales grows cherries. He's also the horticulture chair for New South Wales farmers.
They come here, they thin apples when there's too many apples on the trees. They pick cherries, they grate cherries. They do anything to earn money, the kids from overseas.
Around Australia, farmers have had to throw out or plough in fruit and veg where there aren't enough workers to harvest them.
And I've seen it. I mean, it is bad enough to... Look, we're kind of used to losing your crop with Mother Nature, whether it be hail or rain or whatever. But to lose your crop because you can't pick it...
When is your next harvest due to start?
We're due to start in the next 3-4 weeks.
But now that the working holiday visa will be back up and running, an important source of labour will be back.
And they do all the work in the restaurants, whether it be road works. So I've seen them, they work in orchards and farms, and like I said, most of them are really great kids, and we have not got a problem with them.
Another sector that's been hammered by the border closure is tertiary education. Katrina Jackson from Universities Australia says the sector lost $1.8 billion last year as international students were locked out. And that's not counting the much bigger loss to the wider economy, as they'd normally spend money on living costs and entertainment.
We've got 130,000 students waiting to get back into this country. They've been so patient and they've been so resolute. They've studied online for months and months and months, almost 2 years now. Some of them have just got a year left of their degree. It really is time to get them back into the country so they can finish their degree and get on with their lives. Also, there's a very significant revenue hit that comes from not having international students. What used to be a $40 billion industry is now worth less than $32 billion to the Australian economy. We just need to get this back up and sorted so that we have the people in the country who are making a fantastic contribution both economically to workforce, but also to our world-beating universities.
So you say 130,000 students waiting to come back in. I assume you mean that's just students who are already enrolled and waiting to come back in. That I guess then doesn't count all the extra students you would normally attract every given year. I mean, how many international students in total do you think we could bring into the country if without border restrictions?
Look, students are right now making decisions about where to study. We've seen commencements, that's first-in students, go down by 40%. So an absolute dive in the number of students who are deciding to come overseas to Australia. So we need to really send very positive messages that we're open, we're ready, we're keen to see them all back, because that 40%, it's a really competitive world out there. They can go anywhere they like.
It is almost 17 minutes past 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Health experts are concerned some people self-isolating with COVID-19 aren't getting enough information on how to use a small device that measures oxygen levels. Nearly everyone isolating at home with the virus is supposed to get a pulse oximeter, but new research shows they can overstate the amount of oxygen present in the blood of people with darker skin. Kim Moody has the story.
It's the potentially life-saving piece of equipment being handed out to COVID cases self-isolating at home. A pulse oximeter clips onto your finger and measures the amount of oxygen saturation in your blood. Dr Vanessa Wienink, who's the GP spokesperson for the New Zealand Medical Association, explains how it works.
It does that by shining a light and measuring how much it sort of reflects back. Then a number is displayed on the little screen, which shows you a percentage. So in the case of COVID, we're looking to make sure that people's oxygen saturation is higher than 95%.
But if it drops below that, it's a warning sign.
It means that the oxygen that's coming into your lungs isn't going through into your blood. And often that's because of fluid filling up in your lungs, like pneumonia.
She says that would feel like they're starving for oxygen.
They'd feel like they just couldn't get a breath, and they might be feeling a little bit lightheaded and woozy.
But new research out of the United Kingdom shows oximeters can overstate the amount of oxygen present in people with darker skin. The UK's Health Secretary is so concerned he's ordered a review into whether medical devices are equally effective regardless of the patient's ethnicity. In New Zealand, Māori and Pacifica make up about 72% of our current outbreak. Dr Brian Betty, clinical lead of the Royal New Zealand College of GPs, says the device is just one tool in monitoring someone with COVID-19.
It should be used as part of a package of care, that you have a number to ring a doctor or a nurse if there's any problems, that there's a daily check-in or once every 2 days to check how things are going, to look at the reading and talk about how the patient is feeling. So that package is really, really important in terms of home isolation.
He says the commonly used device is the best we have at this point, but people need to be shown how to use it correctly. Pacifica Medical Association Chief Executive Debbie Sorensen says expecting people to use medical equipment without proper supervision can be a big ask.
There's an assumption that clicking onto a YouTube or a video clip that shows you how to use a device or reading a sheet of paper will actually be sufficient to tell people how to use an device, and I don't think that that's always the case. Certainly in the Pacific community, we have a number of people who English is not their first language, and so relying, on that method isn't that helpful.
She says the instructions provided with the devices often aren't clear, and more effort needs to be made to explain how to use them. Dr Wienink says it's crucial people self-isolating know they should call for urgent help if they feel they need it. The Ministry of Health says a person isolating at home with COVID-19 is called regularly to see how they're doing, and most people self-isolating are given a pulse oximeter within 24 hours.
A shark expert says he is increasingly fielding calls from Bay of Plenty locals about great white sightings. He also says breeding grounds across the world are expanding, and he believes the harbour, which circles Bowen Town, is one of those hotspots. Our reporter Leah Tibbett headed there to take a look for herself.
After an hour's drive from Tauranga, next to orchards hugging the coastline, you'll find yourself in sleepy Bowen Town. It's a holiday destination just down the road from Waihi Beach, with the surf on one side and the harbour on the other. It's here where Riley Elliott expects beachgoers will be bumping into some of his finned friends.
There's going to be 1 million people heading towards places like Tauranga, Mount Maunganui, Waihi, and the greater Coromandel Bay of Plenty region, which seems to be a hot spot for these great whites at the moment. For me, there's a fear that without information, without research, without knowledge given to the public, people may unknowingly step into the shark's domain where we didn't previously expect great whites to be. And
Mr. Elliott applied for a permit to research the behaviours of these sharks in December last year and to ascertain the population. The Department of Conservation states it takes 20 working days for a permit to be approved. Mr. Elliott is still waiting 11 months later. He says the ocean is the shark's domain and people need to know the recreational risks they are taking.
Locals down there don't see great whites as they go and recreate on the ocean more, and that's most definitely going to do nothing but increase as more people go in the water. I can almost see the Jaws movie starting to unfold, and unless you get ahead of these things and give people information, we can run into tragedy for both people and for sharks.
In January, 19-year-old Kayla Marlowe from Hamilton was attacked by a shark in Bowen Town. She was dragged from the water and died from her injuries. Mr. Elliott believes it was a great white responsible for the attack. Down at the harbour's edge, locals aren't so fazed about the prospect of coming across a shark while enjoying the water.
I've been coming here for over 30 years and I've never seen a shark in here yet. Yes, they say they see them, but they outpass the boys on shore. I'm more worried about jet skiers than I am scared of sharks, I'll tell you that, when it's summertime.
There've always been sharks. It's just what it is. I think people are just more aware of it, I don't put signs here. Do you put a sign up if you go into the water you might get wet? Or be careful, you can't drink it, it's salty.
Barry, a regular fisherman in Bowen Town, says shark sightings are to be expected.
Yeah, I've been fishing this harbour for as long as I can remember, and there's always sharks in there. There's always sharks in the harbour. You've got to be aware. There's a few more boats around at sea more now, I suppose. I don't really know. I saw several great whites last year.
Riley Elliott says he is less worried about locals who are familiar with the area, but he is concerned about those who aren't aware of the risk.
There's going to be a million really deservingly desperate Kiwis that just want to go enjoy summer. And they shouldn't have to deal with the fear of the unknown when it comes to these sharks in this harbour, and that was preventable, and it still can be.
The Department of Conservation has been approached for comment about Mr. Elliott's permit application.
One of the world's most popular sporting teams, Manchester United, has sacked its manager after a torrid run of results. The football team sit 7th in the Premier League after being thrashed by lowly Watford over the weekend. The BBC's Joe Linsky has more.
For Manchester United, he was the coach with the connection, the playing icon who became manager. No one hoped the end would be like this.
This has been a dark and dismal day for him and Manchester United Football Club.
In Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's last match, his team were beaten 4-1 by Watford. The end of a run of 7 league games with 1 win and now 3 humiliations. Last month, United lost 5-0 at home to Liverpool and on the same ground were beaten by Manchester City. Defeats to bitter rivals have caused the most damage.
The boys are in a terrible place in their heads themselves now. Of course, they're disappointed. They've let themselves down. We have let ourselves down, and the fans down. And it's hard to stand there and explain that. But that's football, and we have to take the flak for it.
Solskjaer joined United 25 years ago. He was the striker whose late goals meant so much.
Super Sub has done it again!
In 2018, he became temporary manager, and their form was so good he was the standout choice. But as permanent boss, there have been no trophies. Last season, they reached a Europa League final, but at this club, they want more. This was meant to be the year it came good, with the superstar signings to make them title winners. Cristiano Ronaldo scored twice on his debut, but even his goals haven't stopped this dismal run. Now even the players don't hold back.
It was embarrassing for me, to be honest. So that's not acceptable, I think, for this club, for the level of the players that we have. So, yeah, it's another nightmare.
Since 2013, everything's changed. United now seek a 5th permanent boss since Sir Alex Ferguson left. As a player under him, Solskjaer won 6 league titles. He was the super sub who changed things from the bench. But as a coach, too much has gone wrong. And this time for Solskjaer, there's no late turnaround.
With a year until the next Football World Cup in Qatar, activists are once again expressing concern about the treatment of migrant workers there. As major infrastructure is built, the International Labour Organisation says the deaths of workers aren't being properly reported or investigated. The BBC's Valdi Carolsa sent this report from Doha.
It's a Friday evening in downtown Doha, and you would have expected tools to have quietened more than an hour ago. In fact, you wouldn't have expected workers on site at all. It's traditionally a day of rest. But with the World Cup just a year away now, there's a frenzy of finishing touches to iconic landmarks across the city. Like the 4-mile stretch of Corniche, where I'm watching joggers, tourists and families mingle with hundreds of construction workers who are frantically laying grass, planting palm trees and reconstructing walkways. This tiny nation has gone big, building 7 stadia, a metro system, hotels, roads and an airport. And the people doing the work? Migrants. More than 2 million, mainly from South Asia, work here, many in low-paying, long-hour construction jobs. Fatalities are common. At least one construction worker was killed every week in 2020, according to the International Labour Organization. The World Cup has put their working conditions on the global stage.
Please rise for the national anthem of Norway.
There have been on-pitch protests by the Norwegian, German, Danish and Dutch teams during the qualifying rounds. Qatar's Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy, the body in charge of delivering the World Cup, says significant improvements in worker conditions have been made. Fatma Al-Nuami is the communications director.
Improving the conditions of worker welfare, it was always part of our vision. This vision was launched in 2008, even before we winning the right of the World Cup. And what Qatar have been done into the last 10 years, there is a lot of improvement that is happening. Like, for example, abolishing the kafala law, introducing a new minimum wage in the region. Now workers can change actually their jobs and the easy actually to enter and exit the country. So all of this stuff has been introduced. I know that there is still progress need to be happening, but it's a journey which will continue even beyond the tournament itself.
You guys have been doing a lot of thinking on the traffic light system, which is heading our way, first week of December. This person says, are you sure that areas outside Auckland will open with orange traffic light settings? The way we heard it was that would be dependent on vaccination levels for each area. Yes, some of us go in at red. Auckland, definitely. Vaccination levels will be one of the key factors. Also, hospital capacity and outbreak sizes. So it's variable. Nobody goes in at green, though. This person, Dave, actually says, I think the government has it about right. You can't please everyone. Another person says, COVID, it's tough dealing with a pandemic and hard for everyone. But I agree with Chris Hipkins. The best thing people can do to protect their rohi is to encourage and support the vaccine, and then we can all be freer, says Sue. The late news are going to keep you updated throughout the evening. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi Opopo. Tomorrow from 5 a.m. on First Up, they speak to Auckland restaurateurs as they count down to December the 3rd. And Mayor Phil Goff is live too, talking about movement in the traffic light system. Kaua e wariwari te atatero I a mātou kōrero. Check out our stories online.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Auckland's lockdown will come to an end when the country moves to the new traffic light system from next Friday. The death of a man in his 40s with COVID-19 takes the toll associated with the Delta outbreak alone to 14. There have been 205 new community cases today. 2 locations of interest have been identified in Napier for COVID-19. It's been revealed that health officials were unaware the infected person was in Napier and thought he was in Auckland. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Rowdier than the debating chamber at question time, it's Party People. Tau Hinare and Shane Tepo thrash out the political issues of the week with me, Mihingarangi Forbes, holding the Speaker's gavel. Party People, after the 6:30 headlines tomorrow evening on RNZ National. Nā te puna tongarewa a irirangi te motu I utu.
Thanks, Mihi Narangi Forbes. Looking forward to another edition of Party People at this time tomorrow on RNZ National. I'm Brian Crimp, getting ready for another night on the program. My guest after the news at 7, well, actually I've got a couple later on, Sharam Ariam, who's our cultural ambassador, brings us insights into the wonderful world of Persian music. But tonight he wants to